No one could fathom the eerie decline that had plagued Kane for an entire year. His body wasted away before his very eyes. His focus frayed to nothing, his energy drained endlessly day and night, and chronic exhaustion gnawed at his sanity without pause. He'd visited every specialist within a 100-mile radius, undergone every full-body scan and medical panel available on the market, and every single report returned the same cold, baffling verdict: perfectly healthy. Not a single lesion, not one abnormal reading, no trace of physical deterioration whatsoever. By all medical standards, he was a vigorous, healthy man. Yet he was fading away, inch by inch, like a man whose life force was being siphoned off by some invisible, intangible ghost. The world wrote it off as the weariness of early retirement, the quiet burnout of a former titan stepping back from the cutthroat business world. Kane had almost believed it himself, until today. Until the moment his old rival Ronan stepped through his front door, bearing a cup of steaming hot coffee. Until a 6-year-old girl's innocent, unflinching words tore open the quiet, insidious murder plot that had lingered in the shadows for 12 long months. Some killers wield knives and guns. Others kill slowly, softly, and invisibly, hiding poison in the warmth of daily routine, turning ordinary domestic comfort into a slow-burning grave. Ronan had crafted the perfect, unsolvable assassination to let Kane rot away in plain sight, dismissed by everyone as nothing more than a man succumbing to natural age and weariness. It was 10 o'clock in the morning when the front gate of Kane's residence creaked softly, breaking the tranquil stillness of Mapletown's morning air. Kane stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass window of his living room, his fingers resting loosely on the cool metal ledge. His gaze drifted calmly toward the visitor at the gate, sharp and observant beneath his relaxed, retired demeanor. The man standing there was dressed in an immaculate custom-tailored suit, his smile polished and humble, his posture refined and unassuming. In one hand, he clutched a leather-bound business proposal folder. This was Ronan, a prominent real estate investor with a sprawling portfolio across the state, a man whose name carried weight in every high-end business circle nearby. To the outside world, Ronan's visit was nothing more than a professional courtesy. He'd come to seek a partnership with Kane, to leverage the retired tycoon's local influence and decades of industry experience for a joint commercial development project in Mapletown's downtown district. Every social commentator and business insider praised Ronan for his pragmatism, his willingness to collaborate, and his gracious attitude toward a former competitor. Only Kane knew the truth hidden beneath that flawless veneer. Ronan was his long-standing, bitter rival. For more than a decade, the two men had clashed in high-stakes bidding wars, market expansions, and corporate power plays. Time and time again, Ronan had fallen short, outmaneuvered and outplanned by Kane's sharper intellect and steadier strategy. Each defeat had curdled into resentment, festering quietly beneath his professional composure. Ronan never played fair. He never hesitated to abandon ethics, bend rules, or exploit every dirty trick in the book to claim victory. Kane pushed off the window ledge and moved to answer the door, his tone calm and unyielding, devoid of any trace of hostility or suspicion. "Come in." Ronan stepped across the threshold, his eyes sweeping gently over the spotless, minimalist living room, his warm smile never faltering. He wove through nothing but polite small talk, every sentence carefully crafted to project sincerity, camaraderie, and mutual professional respect. His acting was impeccable. His gaze was open, his posture relaxed, no flicker of malice or greed to betray the venom lurking beneath his civility. To any onlooker, he was simply a businessman pursuing a legitimate, mutually beneficial collaboration. "I've long admired your unparalleled industry vision, Kane," Ronan said smoothly, setting his proposal folder down on the marble coffee table. "You've navigated this market for decades with unmatched precision. I'm here today, hoping to partner with you on revitalizing Mapletown's commercial corridor. It's a project that'll profit us both and lift the entire local economy." Kane nodded faintly, offering no verbal response, merely waiting for Ronan to reveal the true intentions hidden behind his polished proposal. He dealt with men like Ronan long enough to know every honeyed word was a trap, every gesture of goodwill a calculated ploy. Soft footsteps echoed from the kitchen, cutting through the quiet hum of conversation. Leah, Kane's housekeeper, stepped out carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Dressed in a neat, plain uniform, her frame slender and reserved, she moved with the quiet diligence that had defined her work for the past year. A single mother with no family or financial support in town, Leah was known by everyone in Mapletown as a quiet, hard-working woman, timid, unassuming, and endlessly grateful for the stable employment Kane had given her. She never spoke out of turn, never asked questions, never complained about long hours or tedious chores. She was the picture of humble, honest labor. Trailing closely behind her was her 6-year-old daughter, Mia, with her hair tied in a soft ponytail and a pale floral dress clinging to her small frame. The little girl was the definition of childish innocence. Gentle, curious, and warm-hearted, she often lingered around Kane, asking simple, earnest questions and clinging to her mother's side. She knew nothing of corporate rivalry, nothing of human greed or deception, seeing only kindness in the adults around her. Leah set the 2 ceramic mugs on the table before Kane and Ronan respectively, her voice soft and deferential. "Enjoy your coffee, sirs." She stepped back, her head bowed respectfully, her hands folded loosely at her sides. Ronan lifted his mug first, taking a slow, leisurely sip, his smile growing warmer and more affable. He expanded on his proposed partnership, detailing market projections, growth potential, and community benefits, painting a vivid picture of shared success. The living room atmosphere was soft and amicable, indistinguishable from any ordinary business consultation. There was no tension, no suspicion, no hint of the deadly game unfolding beneath the surface. Kane reached out, his fingertips brushing the warm ceramic of his mug, his movements slow and natural, ready to play the part of the retired businessman indulging a routine professional discussion. In the split second before his lips touched the rim, the quiet stillness shattered. Mia, who had stood silently observing this entire time, took a sudden step forward. Her clear, childish voice cut through the room's calm like a blade, sharp, certain, and unhesitating. "Mr. Kane, don't drink it." Every pair of eyes locked onto the small girl in an instant. The room's gentle warmth vanished completely, replaced by a bone-chilling silence so thick it was tangible. Mia tilted her small head up, her big round eyes earnest and unwavering, fixed firmly on the coffee mug in Kane's hand. "He put something in your water. A tiny white powder. I saw him." The air froze solid. Leah's body went rigid in an instant. A violent tremor ran down her spine, her head dropping so low her chin nearly touched her chest. All color drained from her face, leaving her pale and breathless. Her fingers twisted tightly into the hem of her uniform, knuckles white with terror. She did not dare lift her gaze, did not dare meet the eyes of either man in the room. A year of buried guilt and hidden fear crashed over her in a single, suffocating wave. Ronan's smile lingered on his face for a split second longer, a hollow mask struggling to hold. The open, sincere warmth in his eyes vanished in a flash, replaced by a flicker of raw panic, fast, subtle, and nearly impossible to catch. He recovered in an instant, schooling his features into gentle confusion, leaning down toward Mia with a feigned tone of fond amusement and helplessness. "Little one, you must be mistaken. Uncle didn't do anything at all." "I'm not wrong." Mia stood her ground, her small shoulders squared with unshakable certainty. "You put your hand in your suit pocket and dropped something into his cup. I watched you the whole time." Children spoke plainly, without pretense, without lies or manipulation. Her simple, honest testimony stripped away every layer of Ronan's carefully constructed facade, laying his dark scheme bare for all to see. Kane's hand hovered in midair, his fingertips still resting on the mug's warm surface. His expression remained utterly unchanged, calm, composed, unreadable. There was no shock, no anger, no confusion, not a single flicker of surprise on his refined features. But inside his mind, every fragmented, unexplained anomaly of the past year slotted perfectly into place. The random bouts of crippling fatigue that struck despite full nights of rest. The sudden brain fog that clouded his sharp, strategic mind midwork. The chronic restlessness and insomnia that left him drained and hollow at dawn. The steady, unexplained physical decline that had baffled every doctor he'd consulted. He had blamed aging, retirement laziness, the quiet monotony of small-town life. He had never suspected foul play, never imagined an enemy would wage a war of slow, silent poisoning against him. Ronan's visit was never about partnership. It was about finishing what he had started a year ago. Kane lifted his gaze slowly, his eyes locking onto Ronan's masked face, his tone steady and neutral, giving nothing away. Children see the world clearly. They rarely lie. Ronan's fleeting panic faded completely, replaced by smooth, practiced composure. He spread his hands wide in a gesture of innocent helplessness, letting out a soft, amused huff. Kane, surely you don't believe childish whimsy. Kids make up stories on a whim. I came here in complete good faith to negotiate a legitimate business deal. I would never stoop to such ridiculous, underhanded tactics. His defense was flawless, his posture open and earnest, selling the illusion of wrongful accusation perfectly. Kane did not argue. He did not press for answers. He did not even glance at the trembling, guilt-stricken Leah standing off to the side. His eyes simply fixed on the tainted coffee mug, a faint, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips, a smile gentle on the surface, yet laced with undeniable, suffocating pressure. It's fine. He lifted the mug slowly, his movements fluid and natural, exactly as any businessman would during a routine negotiation. Relaxation flooded Ronan's tense shoulders. A subtle, triumphant glint flashed in his eyes, hidden beneath his polite smile. He waited patiently, utterly convinced Kane would swallow the poisoned drink, sealing his own fate. Kane tilted his head slightly, pressing his lips to the mug's rim, perfectly mimicking the motion of drinking. But not a single drop passed his lips. He executed the gesture with meticulous precision, fooling Ronan completely, selling the lie effortlessly. After a beat, he lowered the mug, his tone casual and unconcerned. We can discuss the details of your proposal at length. Completely disarmed, Ronan launched into a lengthy, detailed explanation of his so-called partnership plan, his earlier restraint vanishing into unbridled eagerness. Every word he spoke was wrapped in the veneer of mutual benefit and community progress, yet every clause in his proposal hid a ruthless, calculated trap. On paper, the plan outlined a joint development of Mapletown's commercial district, promising equal profit sharing and collaborative growth. In reality, it was a hostile takeover in disguise. Ronan intended to use the partnership as a Trojan horse, slowly infiltrating Kane's local real estate holdings, draining his business resources, and seizing full control of Mapletown's entire commercial market. His plan was simple and brutal. Once the slow-acting drug fully eroded Kane's mental sharpness and physical stamina over the coming months, the once legendary businessman would be reduced to a shadow of his former self, slow-witted, fatigued, and incapable of strategic decision-making. Ronan would then manipulate the weakened Kane into signing over his assets, absorbing his decades of hard-won business foundations with zero resistance, and eliminating his greatest lifelong rival for good. Kane remained seated calmly on the sofa, his posture relaxed and unassuming, his fingers resting lightly on his knee. He listened silently, nodding occasionally as if thoroughly impressed and easily swayed by Ronan's polished pitch. He played the part of the complacent retired tycoon perfectly, a man content with small-town peace, no longer invested in corporate power struggles, oblivious to the greed and deception unfolding before him. Beneath his passive facade, however, his mind worked with the ruthless, precise efficiency of a seasoned strategist. Every exaggerated claim, every logical flaw, every desperate attempt to push the partnership forward was catalogued and analyzed in real time. He noted every flicker of impatience in Ronan's eyes, every subtle shift in his posture as he waited for the drug to take effect. What Ronan believed to be a one-sided manipulation was, in truth, a one-sided observation. The rival thought he was circling a weakened prey, unaware he had walked straight into a carefully laid trap, every move he made fully observed and documented by the man he sought to destroy. The 40-minute conversation stretched on, the air thick with unspoken tension and hidden danger. Leah remained frozen in her spot, her body trembling continuously. She dared not lift her eyes, her mind spinning in a chaotic storm of panic, guilt, and despair. A year of secret guilt crashed over her. Every time she had slipped the tasteless powder into Kane's drinks, every night she had cried over her cowardice, every moment she had watched his health decline under her forced hand. Today's exposure had shattered her year-long pretense of normalcy, and she feared the retribution that was sure to follow. Young Mia, tucked quietly beside her mother, watched the two men converse with quiet confusion. She could not understand the complex, dangerous games adults played. She had told the truth, exposed the bad man's trick, yet everyone continued to act as if nothing was wrong. She could not fathom why Kane had pretended to drink the tainted coffee, why the adults chose to pretend ignorance in the face of clear wrongdoing. In her childish world, right and wrong were black and white, no shades of gray, no deceptive pretense. Ronan finally exhausted his patience after 40 minutes of forced pleasantries. Convinced Kane had fully consumed the poisoned coffee and that victory was inevitable, he wrapped up his pitch with a final, gracious smile. "It seems our visions align perfectly. I'll have my team draft a detailed formal agreement and send it over for your review soon. I won't take up any more of your time today, Kane." "Very well." Kane stood to see him off, his manners impeccable, his demeanor unchanged, giving no hint of the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. He watched Ronan's black sedan roll down the residential street, the engine's rumble fading completely into the quiet afternoon breeze. The moment the car vanished around the corner, every trace of gentle passiveness vanished from Kane's face. His relaxed smile dropped entirely. The warmth in his eyes faded into sharp, icy resolve. The easy posture of a retired civilian melted away, replaced by the cold, commanding presence of a man who had ruled corporate empires and outwitted ruthless rivals for decades. The tranquil living room was instantly engulfed in a heavy, oppressive silence, thick with unspoken danger. Kane stared down at the untouched coffee mug on the table. The liquid inside was clear and ordinary-looking, indistinguishable from any regular cup of brewed coffee. There was no strange odor, no discoloration, no visible residue, nothing that could hint at the deadly neurotoxin dissolved within it. He wasted no time pulling out his private cell phone and dialing Jesse, his most trusted right-hand man. Jesse had served Kane loyally for years, discreet, efficient, and utterly reliable. He never questioned orders, never hesitated, and always delivered results with flawless precision. The call connected on the second ring. "Boss, get here in 10 minutes," Kane ordered, his tone sharp, concise, and devoid of emotion. "Bring forensic sampling tools and portable toxicology testing equipment. Come alone, and keep this off the record." "Understood. ETA 10 minutes." Jesse hung up immediately, no further questions asked. Kane turned his gaze toward the yard, where Leah still stood rigid with fear, clutching Mia tightly to her chest. The single mother's face was ashen, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted, every line on her face etched with terror and remorse. She flinched the moment his eyes landed on her, instinctively pulling her daughter closer, shielding the child with her body. She said nothing, offered no excuses, no denials. Her guilty silence was confession enough. Kane did not raise his voice. He did not demand immediate answers. He knew human nature well. Fear forced people into stubborn silence, while patience often pried loose the truth. Harsh interrogation would only make her clamp up completely, erasing any chance of uncovering the full extent of Ronan's scheme. "Take Mia and sit on the backyard bench," he said calmly. "Don't move from that spot. Don't touch anything and wait for me." Leah nodded numbly, her shoulders shaking violently as she carried her daughter out into the yard, sinking onto the wooden bench in a state of utter despair. True to his word, Jesse arrived exactly 10 minutes later. His vehicle parked discreetly outside the residential gate, unmarked and unassuming. He entered the house alone, carrying a professional forensic kit, sealed evidence containers, and a portable high-precision toxicology analyzer. Every movement was quiet, methodical, and designed to avoid drawing attention. "What do we need done, sir?" Jesse asked in a low voice, his sharp eyes instantly locking on the coffee mug as he readied his equipment. "Sample and seal the contents," Kane instructed coldly. "Run a full toxicology panel. Identify every compound, its mechanism of action, onset time, and cumulative long-term effects. I need a fully verified, legally admissible lab report with zero margin for error. Preserve all chain of custody evidence." Jesse moved with practiced efficiency. He swabbed the mug's interior for residual traces, poured the remaining coffee into a sealed, sterile container, and recorded every step of the process on camera, adhering strictly to forensic protocol to ensure the evidence would hold up in court. No visible particulate residue, no anomalous odor, Jesse reported quietly as he worked. Preliminary assessment indicates a water-soluble, odorless delayed-release neurotoxin, designed to target central nervous system function and degrade physical stamina over time. A cold, sharp chill settled in Kane's chest as the pieces finally locked into place. For an entire year, he had suffered unexplained cognitive decline, chronic fatigue, and mental fog, writing it all off as the natural cost of aging in retirement. Every medical test had come back clean, leaving doctors baffled and him resigned to permanent subpar health. It had never been natural decline. It had been slow, calculated, systematic murder. Ronan had never intended a quick, violent kill. A blatant assassination carried too much risk, too many traces, too much public scrutiny. Instead, he had chosen the cruelest, most undetectable method possible: death by 1,000 tiny cuts. Day after day, microdoses of neurotoxin had eroded Kane's nervous system, dulling his reflexes, crippling his focus, and draining his vitality incrementally. In 6 more months, Kane would have been reduced to a mentally sluggish, physically frail shell of his former self, incapable of managing his businesses, incapable of strategic thought, incapable of defending his assets. The entire world would have believed his decline was natural, and Ronan would have seized his empire without lifting a finger, escaping all blame and consequence. How long for full results? Kane asked flatly. Fast-track lab processing. Complete certified report in 2 hours, Jesse replied, packing up his evidence kit. Chain of custody will be fully documented for legal admissibility. Add 2 more investigative tasks, Kane ordered, his mind already mapping the full scope of the conspiracy. First, trace all of Ronan's financial transactions over the past 12 months. Map every off-the-books payment, every private transfer, every underground business connection. Second, pull every street and residential surveillance camera within a 5-mile radius of his property for the past year. Flag all anomalous entries and unauthorized visits. Jesse understood instantly. You're confirming a long-term insider accomplice. We're tracing the full year-long poisoning pipeline. Exactly. Kane's gaze drifted out to the quiet yard, where Leah sat huddled with her daughter. Ronan lives out of town. He's never local long enough to administer daily doses personally. Someone inside this house has been feeding me poison every single day for a year. Jesse left immediately to execute the orders, leaving the house wrapped in heavy, suffocating silence. Kane sank down onto the sofa, his fingers tapping steadily against the armrest as he mentally replayed every mundane moment of the past year. Every morning glass of water, every afternoon coffee, every evening herbal tea, all prepared faithfully by Leah's hands. Every moment of unexplained exhaustion, every lapse of focus, every wave of sudden dizziness now had a clear, terrifying cause. Leah had been the only constant, the only person with daily, unmonitored access to his food and drink, the only person capable of executing a perfect, year-long, undetectable poisoning campaign. Yet as he recalled Leah's quiet, timid demeanor over the past year, Kane found no malice in his memories. She was quiet to the point of invisibility, humble, hardworking, endlessly grateful for the stable income he provided for her and her daughter. She never asked for more money, never complained about her workload, never displayed greed or resentment toward him or anyone in town. A woman of such gentle, timid character was not a natural killer. She was not the mastermind of this plot. She was a pawn, an unwilling, terrified pawn, broken and coerced by Ronan's ruthless manipulation. Kane chose silence over confrontation. Rushing to question her now would only make her bury the full truth out of fear. He would wait for Jesse's ironclad evidence, for every last hidden thread of the conspiracy to be exposed before rendering judgment. Mapletown was wrapped in an everlasting blanket of soft, soothing tranquility. Gentle seasonal breezes wandered through dense clusters of maple foliage all year long, casting flickering dappled sunlight across the quiet, tree-lined residential streets. The small town operated at a slow, leisurely pace, seemingly untouched by worldly conflict, selfish greed, and hidden darkness. To outsiders weary of urban chaos, it stood as a pristine ideal retreat, a peaceful sanctuary far removed from the ruthless, cutthroat battles of big city corporate business. After decades of navigating high-pressure competition and brutal workplace rivalry, Kane had chosen this quiet town precisely for its pure, undisturbed peace. Yet he could never have foreseen that the most insidious, well-concealed danger of his entire life would take root in this harmless little town, lurking silently within the most ordinary, trivial details of his everyday domestic life. Kane's secluded villa sat quietly in the most peaceful residential district on the town's outskirts, far away from any noisy streets or crowded commercial areas. It was a spacious, minimally designed residence with a clean, tidy layout, surrounded by well-tended green lawns and lush, leafy shrubs that swayed gently in the wind. The entire villa exuded an air of understated luxury, comfortable warmth, and orderly calm. Having spent most of his adulthood trapped in bustling urban high-rises, endless meetings, and high-intensity corporate work, Kane had finally settled into a slow, repetitive retired routine. His days were simple and predictable, rising at dawn to breathe fresh outdoor air and read newspapers in the yard, handling a handful of low-stakes remote investment affairs, and devoting the rest of his time to rest and relaxation. To every acquaintance and local resident who knew him, he was simply a successful former tycoon peacefully enjoying the well-earned ease of early retirement. Leah had stepped into his quiet, retired life exactly 1 year prior. She had arrived at the villa gate with a plain, simple resume and a timid, docile demeanor, formally applying for the vacant full-time housekeeper position. At their first meeting, she appeared frail, reserved, and utterly unassuming, carrying a quiet humility that made her seem completely harmless and trustworthy. She had honestly explained her difficult situation, a widowed woman abandoned by fate, struggling single-handedly to raise her young daughter Mia, with no stable job, no fixed shelter, no relatives or connections to rely on in the entire town. Her only wish was to secure a steady, long-term job to cover her child's daily living costs and schooling expenses. Sincerely moved by her helpless predicament and gentle, earnest temperament, Kane hired her without excessive suspicion or rigorous background scrutiny. He had always firmly believed that ordinary people striving simply to survive and support their families held no hidden malice or cruel agenda. He offered her a generous, above-market salary, safe long-term accommodation within the villa, and even extra private allowances to cover little Mia's daily snacks, clothes, and school supplies. He never treated her as a lowly hired servant, always treating her with patient tolerance, basic courtesy, and genuine respect, granting the vulnerable mother and daughter a stable, warm, and secure living environment they had never possessed before. Throughout the entire year of her employment, Leah had remained impeccably meticulous, dutiful, and discreet in every task she performed. She never slacked off on her work, never took unnecessary breaks, never asked irrelevant personal questions, and never pried into Kane's illustrious past business career or private personal life. She stayed humble, quiet, and obedient at all times, strictly abiding by her job responsibilities and household rules. Every movement she made was soft, cautious, and thoughtful, keeping the entire villa spotlessly clean, neatly organized, and warmly livable every single day. Gradually, Kane grew completely accustomed to her considerate, reliable care, no longer paying any special attention to her daily work habits or trivial behaviors. This ordinary, trusting daily routine, built on long-term familiarity and mutual peace, became Ronan's most insidious and lethal weapon. He had studied human nature thoroughly during his decades in business. Daily familiarity inevitably breeds negligence, and the most ordinary routines are the best hiding places for dark secrets. No normal person would ever doubt the trivial, repetitive details of everyday life, especially the warm, harmless daily interactions between a kind employer and his trusted, long-serving housekeeper. Every single morning without exception, Leah would personally prepare a steaming cup of hot coffee tailored perfectly to Kane's long-standing taste, carefully adjusted temperature, moderate sweetness, and no extra additives or condiments. It was a fixed daily morning ritual that Kane had kept for decades, a small, comforting habit that anchored his quiet, retired life. Every peaceful afternoon, while Kane sat in the yard reading books or resting indoors, she would quietly bring him warm boiled water or mild light tea. These trivial, thoughtful daily gestures had become an indispensable part of his monotonous retired life, so simple and ordinary that they never once aroused the slightest suspicion or wariness. Yet Kane never harbored the slightest suspicion that every carefully brewed cup of coffee and every warm drink carried a hidden, silent fatal threat. Every day, in the fleeting quiet gaps when no one's eyes were on her, Leah would quietly blend an extremely tiny dose of fine white toxin powder into Kane's drinks. The specially made powder was completely tasteless and odorless, dissolving instantly into hot liquid without leaving any visible sediment, no abnormal color change, and no peculiar smell of any kind. It merged seamlessly into ordinary coffee and tea, completely undetectable by human senses and impossible to spot in casual daily observation. This specialized neurotoxin was uniquely formulated for slow, cumulative internal damage, designed specifically for silent long-term poisoning. It would never trigger acute physical pain, sudden illness, or obvious immediate symptoms that could arouse vigilance. Instead, it accumulated quietly within Kane's nervous system and bloodstream day after day, slowly eroding his nerve functions, gradually draining his physical vitality, and blurring his once sharp mental clarity. The damage progressed extremely gently and imperceptibly, creeping forward little by little over months and seasons, so subtly that Kane could only attribute his growing physical discomfort to the natural decline of aging and the mental laziness brought by leisurely retirement. Month after month, the invisible poison gnawed away at Kane's health without pause. In the earliest stage, he only felt occasional drowsiness and mild physical fatigue, which he casually dismissed as the side effects of long-term relaxation and insufficient physical exercise. As time passed, however, the trivial discomfort escalated into persistent, bone-deep exhaustion that never faded with rest. He began to suffer from frequent mental fog, obvious difficulty focusing his attention, and slowed mental responses. His once razor-sharp business thinking, which had been capable of sorting out complicated financial data and judging intricate market trends in seconds, gradually turned sluggish, dull, and unreliable. His sleep quality also deteriorated drastically. No matter how early he rested at night, he could only fall into shallow, restless, fragmented slumber, tossing and turning uncontrollably. Every morning he woke up feeling thoroughly drained and exhausted, unable to recover his energy even after a full night's sleep and adequate rest. His robust physique, which had withstood decades of high-intensity work, endless pressure, and frequent business over time, began to decline rapidly. He grew visibly thinner, his facial complexion turned consistently pale and bloodless, and his whole body lost the vigorous, energetic vitality he had carried for most of his life. Deeply confused and troubled by his continuous, unexplained physical decline, Kane spared no time or expense seeking professional medical treatment. He underwent thorough full-body physical examinations, precise professional neurological tests, and repeated blood screenings at the most authoritative top-tier medical institutions. Yet every single test result came back completely normal, showing no organic lesions, no nerve damage, no inflammation, and no trace of physical disease. All professional medical experts could only attribute his persistent symptoms to long-term career burnout and adaptive physical changes after retiring from high-pressure work, leaving them unable to offer any effective treatment or reasonable explanation for his suffering. No doctor, no expert, and no outsider could ever have guessed that all of his strange, undiagnosable physical problems stemmed from the countless ordinary cups of coffee and warm water he drank every single day, from the most trusted, harmless daily care in his simple retired life. The most terrifying advantage of Ronan's vicious scheme was its extreme ordinariness. Hidden deep within repetitive, trivial daily routines and wrapped in warm, ordinary domestic details, this silent poisoning plan was perfectly disguised and utterly impossible to guard against. Throughout this entire torturous year, Leah endured endless internal conflict, unbearable guilt, and silent mental torment every single day. Every time she prepared the toxin-laced drinks for Kane, her hands trembled uncontrollably with fear and self-loathing. She knew full well that she was silently harming the kind benefactor who had taken her and her daughter in, sheltered them from hardship, and given them a stable life. Every night after Mia fell into innocent sleep, she would drown in intense self-blame and regret, hating her own cowardice, resenting her helplessness, and loathing the sinful compromise she was forced to make every day. Yet Ronan's cruel threats were like an unbreakable tightrope constantly strangling her heart and sanity. He kept strict, long-distance surveillance on little Mia all year round, sending regular updates and cold, veiled warnings to remind Leah of his control. Whenever she hesitated, wavered, or considered confessing the truth, Ronan would ruthlessly emphasize that her daughter's young life was always firmly in his grasp. As a helpless widow with no family, no connections, and no one to rely on in a strange town, Mia was Leah's only spiritual pillar in her entire world. Left with no other choice, she could only grit her teeth, endure the brutal torture of her conscience, and persist in this silent, hidden sin day after day. Ronan had calculated every single detail of his revenge plan with terrifying precision. He thoroughly understood Leah's deepest weakness and maternal obsession, memorized all of Cain's daily living habits, and grasped every trivial detail of the villa's daily operation. He had no need for bloody violence or blatant, terrifying threats. He only needed to manipulate a helpless mother's deepest love and greatest fear to execute the most thorough, most concealed revenge in complete secrecy. He waited patiently and calmly for time to work for him, allowing the slow-acting toxin to erode Cain's body and mind little by little, quietly waiting for his powerful lifelong rival to collapse completely in unsuspecting peace. For more than a decade, Ronan had suffered repeated defeats at Cain's hands in fierce business competition. He had fallen far behind in core market layout, key project bidding, and large-scale industrial expansion. All his ambition, talent, and years of hard struggle had been continuously suppressed and crushed by Cain's far superior strength and strategic vision. Fully aware that he could never defeat Cain through fair, open competition, he resolutely chose the darkest, most despicable, and most covert way to destroy his rival. He planned to gradually strip Cain of his health, his mental clarity, and his ability to resist, reducing the once powerful tycoon to a weak, powerless invalid, before stepping in to seize all of his business resources, industries, and market achievements effortlessly. For a full 12 months, every step of his malicious conspiracy unfolded strictly according to his perfect plan. Cain's physical fitness and mental state deteriorated steadily and silently day by day, while his vigilance and worldly caution faded gradually along with his declining vitality. He grew increasingly accustomed to the simple, peaceful pace of retirement life, becoming far less sensitive to the hidden intrigues and cruel schemes of the business world. The entire secret conspiracy progressed flawlessly without a single flaw, clue, or suspicion, until little Mia's pure, innocent, and unreserved truthful words finally pierced the thick layer of secrecy, overturned Ronan's perfectly laid scheme, and pulled the hidden darkness into the light. The quiet morning stillness of the villa was shattered the moment Mia spoke. Her young voice was clear, crisp, and unwavering, cutting straight through the polite, restrained atmosphere of the business conversation. In an instant, every subtle sound in the room vanished. The rustle of wind through the window foliage, the distant chirp of birds outside, and the low hum of indoor silence all faded away, replaced by a heavy, suffocating tension that pressed down on every person present. Cain's fingers rested steadily on the warm ceramic edge of the coffee mug, frozen mid-motion. His expression remained calm and unreadable on the surface, revealing none of the shock stirring inside him. For an entire year, he had endured unexplained fatigue, persistent brain fog, and steady physical decline, always attributing his poor condition to the burnout of decades of high-pressure business work and the languor of early retirement. He had never once suspected deliberate harm, let alone a long-term, meticulously concealed poisoning plot woven into his everyday life. Yet the 6-year-old girl's simple, honest words pulled back the veil covering a full year of hidden darkness. Every strange, unexplained symptom that had plagued his body slotted into place, forming a complete and terrifying truth he had never dared to consider. Mia stood firmly in place, her small frame unshaken, her round eyes bright and earnest. There was no fear, no childish uncertainty in her gaze, only absolute certainty. She had watched every movement Ronan made with the careful observation unique to children, unnoticed by adults who were too absorbed in their own conversation. She had seen him quietly take a small packet from his suit pocket, tilt his hand slightly over Kane's coffee mug, and sprinkle a fine white powder into the steaming drink in a quick, covert motion. Adults were skilled at wearing masks, hiding malice behind polite smiles and formal tones, but children saw the world without pretense. They noticed the tiny, overlooked details that adults ignored, and they spoke the unvarnished truth without hesitation or deception. Ronan's polished smile faltered for the first time since stepping into the villa. A fleeting flash of panic darted across his eyes, fast and subtle, almost impossible to catch. He quickly regained his composure, twisting his expression into a gentle, helpless laugh, pretending to dismiss the child's words as innocent imagination. "Little one, you must have misseen," Ronan said softly, his tone deliberately warm and soothing, tailored to sound gentle and reassuring. "Uncle didn't touch your Mr. Kane's drink at all. You've probably been watching too many stories and mistook ordinary movements for something else." His words were calm and logical, designed to guide everyone in the room to dismiss Mia's testimony as childish fantasy. To any onlooker, it was easy to believe a young child had misinterpreted a harmless gesture during an adult conversation. But Mia shook her head firmly, her small jaw set with unyielding resolve. "I didn't miss C. I watched you the whole time. You put white powder in his cup. Only his cup, not yours." The precise detail of her statement stripped away all of Ronan's excuses. She had not only witnessed the act, but also noticed the deliberate distinction in his behavior. Ronan had only tampered with Kane's drink, ensuring his own coffee remained untouched and safe. This was no random childish misunderstanding. It was clear, specific observation. Ronan's fake smile stiffened completely. The panic in his eyes lingered longer this time, and his calm facade began to crack at the edges. He had spent a full year perfecting his silent, undetectable scheme, relying on the absolute secrecy of his slow poison method. He had always believed his plan was airtight, leaving no witnesses, no evidence, and no room for exposure. He had never imagined his entire elaborate plot would be ruined by a 6-year-old child's innocent honesty. Standing quietly to the side, Leah's body turned completely rigid. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her deathly pale. Her hands trembled uncontrollably at her sides, and her breathing turned shallow and ragged. For 12 months, she had guarded this terrifying secret alone, forcing herself to cooperate with Ronan's cruel scheme under the threat of her daughter's safety. She had endured endless guilt and self-loathing, sinking deeper into despair with every passing day, terrified that the truth would one day see the light. Now, the moment she had feared most had arrived. The truth she had buried for a year was exposed in an instant by her own daughter. Every suppressed emotion, fear, guilt, panic, and helplessness, crashed over her all at once, leaving her on the verge of collapse. The living room remained trapped in a heavy, oppressive silence. The warm sunlight streaming through the windows no longer felt gentle, but instead felt cold and piercing, as if it could strip away every layer of pretense and expose the ugliest hidden truths. Kane slowly lowered his hovering hand, placing the poisoned coffee mug firmly back on the marble tabletop. His movements were steady and unhurried, betraying none of the shock or anger brewing beneath his calm exterior. After years of brutal corporate competition, he was adept at hiding his emotions and maintaining control even in the most sudden and dangerous situations. He turned his gaze toward Ronan, his eyes calm and deep, devoid of obvious rage, yet sharp enough to see through every ounce of the man's hypocrisy. "Children do not lie easily," Kane said quietly. His tone was flat and unemotional, yet it carried undeniable weight, pressing heavily on Ronan's crumbling facade. Ronan's heart tightened sharply. He knew perfectly well that he had been caught red-handed, yet years of deception and ruthless competition had taught him to never admit defeat easily. He immediately adjusted his expression, feigning sincere confusion and slight grievance, spreading his hands in a gesture of innocent helplessness. "Kane, you can't possibly take a child's random words seriously," Ronan argued smoothly. "We are here to discuss formal business cooperation. I have devoted my time and energy to preparing a legitimate project proposal, hoping to achieve mutual benefit. How could I do something so ridiculous and irrational? This is nothing but a little girl's playful misunderstanding." He continued to defend himself confidently, trying to shift the atmosphere back to ordinary business negotiation, attempting to erase the tense suspicion that had settled over the room. He still clung to hope that Kane would choose to dismiss the incident as a childish mistake, allowing him to preserve his cover and continue his long-term plan. Kane did not argue further. He did not rush to question, did not angrily confront, and did not expose Ronan's lies on the spot. He simply stood there quietly, his gaze fixed steadily on Ronan, the faint, calm look in his eyes carrying a quiet, overwhelming pressure. He knew better than to rush. After a full year of silent suffering and gradual decline, he needed no impulsive outburst. He would hear every lie Ronan wove, witness every act of hypocrisy, and record every trace of the man's guilt. The longer Ronan pretended, the more solid the evidence of his malice became. After a brief pause, Kane spoke in an unchanging, casual tone, as if the terrifying accusation from moments ago had never happened at all. "Finish your project explanation." "I'm listening." Ronan was momentarily stunned. He had prepared countless defenses and excuses, expecting fierce questioning and open suspicion. He had never anticipated that Kane would choose to ignore the incident entirely and continue the negotiation as usual. A surge of cautious relief washed over him. He mistakenly assumed that Kane still harbored no real suspicion, that he still believed his physical decline was merely retirement fatigue. Convinced that the child's random words had not shaken Kane's trust in him, Ronan relaxed his tense nerves and restarted his project introduction with renewed confidence. He had no idea that from this moment on, every word he spoke, every expression he made, and every move he took was being watched, judged, and recorded by Kane. The tables had quietly turned. The hunter who had lurked in the shadows for a year had unknowingly stepped into the trap laid by his prey. With Kane appearing completely relaxed and unsuspecting, Ronan set aside all caution and began elaborating on his partnership proposal. Every clause of his pitch was wrapped in tempting promises of mutual profit and local community development, yet beneath the benign wording lay a cold, calculated trap. He intended to take full advantage of Kane's retired status, quietly seizing his long-rooted local business resources to complete a premeditated hostile takeover. On paper, the cooperation plan looked perfectly fair and reasonable, featuring joint investment, equal profit sharing, and shared operational risks. To outsiders, it seemed like a standard, win-win business collaboration. In reality, it was nothing but a deliberate disguise. Ronan planned to use the urban renewal project as a Trojan horse, infiltrating Kane's real estate assets, draining his accumulated commercial resources, and gradually stripping away his dominant market influence in Mapletown. Ronan had long known he could never defeat Kane through fair competition. For over a decade, every one of his aggressive business strategies had been outmatched by Kane's steady, precise judgment and far-sighted vision. Unable to win through legitimate rivalry, he had resorted to despicable, underhanded sabotage. 4 months, he had let slow-acting neurotoxin erode Kane's mental clarity and physical stamina, dulling his sharp business instincts step by step. Once Kane was mentally and physically weakened, Ronan planned to pressure him into signing away core assets and project rights, leaving him with nothing while he seized full control of the regional market. Throughout Ronan's lengthy presentation, Kane remained calm and composed on the sofa. He nodded occasionally, perfectly playing the part of a retired tycoon content with peaceful small-town life, no longer concerned with corporate competition. He appeared genuinely impressed by Ronan's polished project introduction, showing no trace of suspicion or resistance. Beneath his tranquil facade, however, Kane analyzed every word with the sharp precision of a seasoned strategist. He easily saw through Ronan's exaggerated prospects, logical loopholes, and urgent desire to sign the contract on the spot. Ronan's eagerness to lock down the deal immediately fully exposed the fraud hidden behind his so-called sincere cooperation. The negotiation lasted more than 2 hours. Warm sunlight flooded the bright villa, weaving an illusion of peaceful, ordinary business communication. No outsider would have suspected that one man was plotting silent murder and commercial plunder, while the other had already unraveled every layer of his deception, waiting patiently for the right moment to counterattack. When he finished his introduction, Ronan leaned forward faintly, barely hiding his anticipation. "These terms benefit both of us immensely. We can sign the preliminary contract today, complete project filings next week, and officially launch the town's commercial renovation soon. With your prestigious local reputation and my efficient execution, This project will become a remarkable urban renewal success across the state. Kane lifted his gaze calmly, neither agreeing nor refusing. I need 3 days to review the full contract and verify market data. I will deliver my formal reply after thorough consideration. Disappointment flashed across Ronan's face. He had hoped for an immediate signature, fearing any delay would bring unforeseen risks to his hidden poisoning scheme. Still, he dared not push too hard for fear of arousing Kane's suspicion. He forced a polite smile and nodded. Of course, I have always respected your rigorous and prudent work style. After a few empty pleasantries, Ronan had no choice but to end his visit. He stood up, adjusted his suit, and glanced regretfully at the untouched poisoned coffee mug. Yet he quickly reassured himself that he still had countless chances to continue his plan. As long as the scheme remained undetected, Kane's gradual decline was inevitable. The iron gate clicked shut behind Ronan, cutting off the outside world completely. The moment the door closed, the false peace lingering in the living room shattered entirely, leaving only heavy, suppressed truth hanging in the air. Leah's tightly tensed body collapsed in an instant. Her legs went weak, and she leaned shakily against the wall, trembling violently as cold sweat soaked through her uniform. A full year of buried fear, crushing guilt, and silent suffering erupted all at once. For 12 months, she had guarded a deadly secret, endured endless inner torment, and obeyed Ronan's cruel threats solely to protect her young daughter. Kane stared steadily at her trembling figure. His tone was calm and solemn, free of anger yet carrying undeniable gravity. How long have you been working for him? This simple question shattered Leah's last psychological defense. Silent tears streamed down her face, and her shoulders shook violently with suppressed sobs. She did not dare lift her head, terrified of seeing disappointment in Kane's always kind eyes. I had no choice, sir, she choked out brokenly. He threatened Mia. He said he would hurt my child if I disobeyed him. I have no family, no money, no one to turn to in this town. Mia is my entire world. Tears washed away her usual gentle, obedient disguise, revealing the desperate mother trapped in an inescapable nightmare. Day after day, she had forced herself to poison the man who had sheltered and cared for her and her daughter. Every dose of toxin tore her conscience apart, yet she had no way to resist, bound by fear for Mia's safety. Kane listened quietly. After decades navigating the ruthless business world, he understood human complexity well. He knew her betrayal stemmed not from inherent malice, but from desperate helplessness under cruel threats. He felt no anger toward her, only sorrow for her agonizing predicament. Tell me everything from the beginning, he said steadily, his tone offering her a sliver of stability amid her collapse. It all began 12 months prior. After her husband died of illness, Leah was left drowning in massive medical debt, with only a young Mia to raise. Without a stable job, fixed residence, or local connections, she struggled desperately to survive on the brink of poverty. It was at her most vulnerable and hopeless moment that Ronan found her, like a predator targeting the weakest, most defenseless prey. Ronan had thoroughly investigated her background in advance. He knew of her poverty, her isolation, and her greatest weakness, her daughter. He approached her with feigned kindness at first, offering temporary financial help and shelter to gain her trust. The moment Leah let her guard down, Ronan revealed his cruel, manipulative true nature. He had secretly taken photos of Mia and threatened to harm the child if Leah refused to obey his orders. His demand was simple yet terrifying. She must take up the position of Kane's housekeeper and secretly poison his daily drinks. The toxin was colorless, tasteless, and completely undetectable by ordinary means. It caused no sudden illness or obvious symptoms, accumulating slowly in the human body to damage the nervous system, drain physical vitality, and blur mental clarity. Its effects perfectly mimicked natural aging and work burnout, making the long-term poisoning impossible to diagnose through routine medical checks. Ronan controlled her with extreme tyranny. He enforced absolute secrecy, regularly delivered toxin powder through his associates, monitored her actions remotely, and renewed his threats whenever she showed the slightest hesitation. Mia's safety was forever held hostage to force her complete compliance. Trapped and powerless, Leah had no choice but to surrender. Crushed by unbearable guilt, She took the housekeeper's job and embarked on a year-long nightmare of involuntary complicity in silent murder. Throughout that painful year, Cain treated Leah and Mia with immense kindness and generosity. He never looked down on their poor background, doted on little Mia with small gifts and snacks, and quietly provided them with a stable, safe life they could never have afforded on their own. The kinder Cain was, the deeper Leah's guilt grew. Every night after Mia fell asleep, she wept alone in the dark, hating her own cowardice. She watched Cain grow weaker and mentally duller month by month, knowing she was the cause of his decline, yet she could not break free from Ronan's threats. She had countless opportunities to confess and beg for forgiveness, but fear for her daughter always crushed her courage. She sank deeper into guilt and despair, believing she would spend her whole life as a hidden accomplice to murder. That day, however, Mia's innocent honesty broke through all layers of secrecy. The little girl's pure, fearless testimony exposed Ronan's year-long scheme and ended Leah's painful, silent torment. Liana weakly on the floor, tears flooding down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, sir. I know I have betrayed your kindness and committed an unforgivable sin. I will accept any punishment you deem fit. But please, spare Mia. She knows nothing of this darkness. She is completely innocent." Cain watched her quietly. He had already guessed most of the truth, but he was still shocked by how cruel and thorough Ronan's revenge plan was. He had never expected his rival to exploit a helpless single mother and an innocent child as tools for his greed and vengeance. "Stand up," Cain said gently. "I understand your helplessness. You acted out of fear for your child, not out of evil intent." Leah rose, staring at him in utter disbelief, never imagining she would receive forgiveness after such a terrible betrayal. Cain's gaze drifted to Mia, who hid timidly behind her mother, clutching her clothes tightly. The child's innocent courage had torn open the only crack in Ronan's perfect, airtight criminal scheme. "Mia saved my life," Cain said softly. "Without her, I would have continued ingesting the toxin, mistaking my decline for aging and retirement fatigue, until Ronan destroyed me completely." His tone turned cold and sharp as he glanced at the tainted coffee mug. "Ronan's scheme is far crueler and more calculated than I suspected. He planned this revenge for a decade, lurked in the shadows for a full year, and used innocent lives as disposable pawns to satisfy his hatred and greed. He sought to ruin me silently, leaving no evidence or witnesses. But the truth is now exposed. He no longer controls this game." Cain took out his phone with calm, decisive movements. He first captured clear photos of the poisoned coffee to secure on-site evidence, then dialed his private lawyer and a professional toxicology testing institute. "Send specialists immediately to collect and test toxin samples, preserve all evidence of long-term poisoning, and fully investigate Ronan's abnormal behaviors and business layouts over the past year. Document every trace of his hidden crimes." After arranging all evidence collection work, the cold sharpness in Cain's eyes faded slightly as he looked back at the trembling mother and daughter before him. 3 weeks later, the formal court ruling was handed down, final and unappealable. The open court trial presented every piece of evidence in full public view. The prosecution laid out the complete timeline of crimes: 12 months of premeditated neurotoxin poisoning, coercive exploitation of a vulnerable single mother, conspiracy to abduct a minor, attempted felony kidnapping, and dozens of counts of corporate fraud, monopolization, and economic sabotage spanning 5 years. The defense team had no valid grounds for rebuttal. Faced with overwhelming, irrefutable evidence, official toxicology reports, authenticated financial records, verified audio and video recordings, and eyewitness testimony, the jury reached a unanimous verdict within hours. Ronan was convicted on all counts. Sentencing was handed down immediately: a lengthy cumulative prison term with no possibility of early parole, permanent forfeiture of all illegally acquired assets, and a lifelong ban from engaging in any commercial or business activities. His once glamorous business empire crumbled to dust overnight. His name became synonymous with deception, malice, and ruthless corporate corruption across the entire state. The man who had craved supremacy and spent a decade plotting revenge was left with nothing but a permanent criminal record and a lifetime of incarceration to atone for his countless crimes. With Ronan's criminal network fully dismantled and every accomplice held legally accountable, The shadow that had loomed over Mapletown for an entire year was finally lifted. The court issued a formal ruling clearing Leah of all intentional criminal wrongdoing. The judge acknowledged her status as a coerced accomplice, a vulnerable victim of extreme duress and child endangerment blackmail. Given her year-long trauma, her genuine remorse, and her critical, unintended role in exposing Ronan's entire conspiracy through Mia's confession, she received a full conditional discharge with no criminal record. Kane's health gradually returned in the months that followed. With the cumulative neurotoxin completely flushed from his system and no further exposure, his constant fatigue faded, his mental clarity fully restored, and his vitality returned little by little. The mysterious, debilitating ailment that had baffled every medical expert was finally gone for good. True to his merciful nature, Kane did not turn Leah and Mia away. He retained Leah as his housekeeper, offering her stable, dignified employment without resentment or judgment. He knew she had paid a heavy price for her moment of helplessness, trapped between survival and maternal love, and had suffered enough in guilt and fear over the past year. Life slowly returned to peaceful normalcy for the small family. Freed from Ronan's suffocating threats and their year-long nightmare of secrecy and fear, Leah regained her calm and courage. No longer forced to compromise her conscience to survive, she lived with quiet gratitude and peace each day. Mia continued to grow into a bright, pure-hearted child. Too young to fully grasp the darkness of the conspiracy she had uncovered, she only knew that the scary man was gone, that her mother no longer cried at night, and that Mr. Kane was healthy and happy once more. Her innocent courage had unknowingly unraveled a year of hidden murder and greed, saving 2 lives and bringing a ruthless criminal to justice. Mapletown's quiet days returned, bathed in warm, untainted sunlight. Kane often sat on his backyard bench in the soft afternoon glow, watching Mia chase butterflies across the lawn, and Leah tend to the garden with a gentle smile. He had spent decades navigating the cutthroat cruelty of the business world, learning that greed and rivalry could twist men into unrecognizable monsters. But this ordeal had also reminded him of the pure goodness that still existed in the world, the bravery of an innocent child, the desperate love of a mother, and the redemption waiting for those who stumbled under unbearable pressure. Rivalry, deception, and revenge had poisoned hearts and destroyed lives. Yet honesty, mercy, and unyielding integrity had ultimately prevailed. The silent poison that had haunted Mapletown was gone at last, and in its place came lasting peace, hard-won and well-deserved.